Welcome back, everyone. Welcome, Becky and Karen. Thanks again for being here today. And now let's address some of the hard facts. Like, I know that there were people listening to our previous segment who were like, yeah, right, I want to be an engineer. I can't be a psychology major and pivot into engineering. And so let's just acknowledge that they're correct. So let's talk about some of the majors that you do actually have to declare at the outset. Like on your college application, you have to declare those to have access. Karen, why don't you address that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think engineers, right? That's the most obvious one for me. I mean, I do kind of always joke that engineers kind of come out of the womb wired to be engineers. Like it's like the only thing they could be. And I don't mean that in a derogatory. I could not be an engineer like that.
Mhm.
You could give me all the skills and I would still be terrible at that. Engineers kind of usually they've just always known that's what they want to do, right? They're the ones who were always tinkering with the toaster oven or they want to know how things work. I always joke, my husband's an engineer, and the other day, I give this example all the time, like the toaster oven broke, which is why I said toaster oven. And he was like, tweaking it and trying to like fix it. And he was like, and I was like checked out and I was like already making myself cereal. And he was like, don't you want to know why it's broken? And I was like, no,
Nope.
I have zero interest in why it's broken, less than zero. I'm just thrilled that Target makes another one for $20 and it's 5 minutes down the road, which I will be at later this afternoon. Like, could care less why this is broken. He's like, like, we just don't operate this way, right? Like, he's always been like that. And I've always been like this, right? And so it's not surprising I was a humanities major and he is not, right? So there are some people I think for whom are either kind of wired a certain way or always, feel like they've had a calling, right? I have met future doctors, nurses, engineers, teachers, pastors, social workers, people who've just felt a calling their entire life to do something. And I believe that exists. I really do. And many of them do go on to be those things. I would say a lot of the time they do end up being those things. And that's fine too. So it's not to say that that's not real. I think that is real. And some of those are more important that you start off from the get-go, right? And maybe not teaching per se, right? You can be that as a sophomore, you could probably do that later. Engineers is the one that I particularly drive home. I always say, if you think remotely you want to be an engineer, start off in engineering. One, because it's so linear in progression, right? You have to take X before you take Y. You have to take Y before you take Z, right? It all builds upon each other. And if you don't just figure that out until the end of sophomore year, you're probably not graduating in 4 years. That's probably a realistic, unless you take, a lot of summer school. I also think engineering is a quick litmus test for students, right? At Virginia Tech, I think the number they give is that 50% of freshman engineers will not end up as sophomore engineers, right? That's a huge attrition rate. And I would rather you know that now, right? Like, it's great to figure it out, right? If you're like, this is really not for me, good. I'd rather you know that freshman year than senior year, right? Kind of to your friends in the film industries kind of point, right? Let's try this out for size real quick. And this is usually either a good fit or it's not. And so there are some jobs like or majors like that I would suggest that you need to start off with. I don't know if Becky or Sally, you have other suggestions, but engineering to me is like the quintessential one. If you even think about it, start off there.
And I'm cognizant that some people want to get through school as quickly as possible to minimize finances. They're not really into the whole liberal arts and sciences thing, which to me is a very, very sad thing, but we're here to serve everybody. So if you want to be a nurse, if you want to be able to get to work as soon as possible, then absolutely. Like nursing is another example of those, or like physical therapy if you want to do an accelerated program. But like, I really think that the people that I'm trying to get through to are the people who really history is their favorite class, but they're thinking computer science or engineering because that's where the jobs are. And I'm not going to argue with the fact that engineers have great average incomes, right? But at the same time, as we learned, like Becky and I in our research on majors to careers in that pathway, history majors at the top level of their income range actually make more than engineers at the bottom level. And if you don't really want to be an engineer, you're probably not going to be a very good one, or you're just going to stop being an engineer, which is what I've seen with some people who went into engineering, didn't like it, and then had to find some other sort of career pathway. So, Becky, I was wondering if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would. What I was thinking as you were both talking is how easy it is to use a word and think it means something, and someone else hears it a different way. And so I totally agree with Karen Spencer that in the structure of a four-year institution, if you want to leave with an engineering major or degree, you should start there, because structurally sequential coursework is set up to be that way. But I also think a lot of entry-level jobs that teenagers would say, oh, that's a job in engineering, are filled with math majors and computer science majors and physics majors. And so I think it is the takeaway for teenagers is this is all so new and you have never done it before. And the value of asking people in the path that you want, professionals in the field, for some grounded experience in what matters is so helpful. Part of the research that Sally and I were doing that you mentioned earlier, I connected with multiple hiring managers at Google, hiring software engineers, and not a single one of them talked about major as a priority, or the value of being an engineering major as a priority when they were hiring fresh out of college undergrads. They talked about creativity and the desire to change the world with solutions and being able to collaborate to create meaningful products. That's not the same as majoring in engineering. And so this is where, again, just like, we all don't know what we don't know. And so for the listeners out there who are for sure on an engineering track, that is awesome. Talk to your college counselor, talk to us about what that means for your application, and talk to professionals in the industry about the skills and planning and credentials that might be useful for you as you are navigating that path. But Sally, I do have 20 tabs open right now that I would love to share. So I'm going to share my screen, and host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh,
Uh-oh. Sally, are you able to change that access? Are you the official host?
I am. I should have figured this out before, but I completely forgot.
Is there a little up caret next to where you have the screen share button?
Or
in
even
real
under
time.
participants.
Watch
Oh, here we go.
these majors navigate technical solutions in real time.
This is my husband's like, this is why you should listen to my engineering skills.
Okay. All right.
Success.
You should be able to share now.
Woohoo! Y'all, we did it.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna share my entire
Our
screen.
cooperative soft skills we just
Yes,
used,
exactly.
Okay, so right now I am on the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce, the economic value of college majors. If you are not following along, you can do an internet search for this. Georgetown, CEW, economic value of college majors. This is a treasure trove of years and years and years of wages over time, either as a bachelor's degree or advanced degree, and what people are making as they go. Summary, key findings, surprise, surprise, STEM majors on average make more, right? Like that doesn't surprise us. But what I find interesting is to think about what this means for an individual human. Like any one kid is not the average. Like none of us are the average. We're all bringing what we bring to any situation. And so Sally, I know you were referencing this earlier, the average computer science or computer engineer makes so much more than the average communications and mass media major, right? Like that looks like the average communications major is making 57K, the average computer engineer is making 72K. But what I find interesting is that the third quartile of computer engineers and the second quartile of communications and mass media professionals are making the same thing, right? Like the top half, the high earners in communications and the low earners in computer engineering, that's the same. And we cannot interpret individual choice. We don't know who chose to go work for a nonprofit or who chose to go work for Amazon. But I wonder how much of this is who was freaking good at it, who was in these classes and like me had this experience of the clouds opening and the sun shining and feeling powerful and smart, and who was like, well, my parents always told me that the jobs are in, so I just got to do it. And right, like, I don't know, we cannot assume, but I think it's so interesting to have some sort of content to consider as you are thinking about pathways through majors.
Yeah.
And speaking of pathways through majors, I mentioned earlier how we have no idea what we don't know. I adore the University of Missouri majors website. Whether or not you're
Oh.
looking at the University of Missouri, this is so good. Majors.missouri.edu. You can see the 300 degrees available at Mizzou, right? Like no one in high school is thinking, oh, I want to study Afro-Romance literature and translation, or I want to study
I don't even know what that
agricultural," right? Like,
means.
what is this stuff? But what's so great about it, going back down to the C's, is when you click on a major, the Mizzou website tells you all about it. What does this actually mean? And what do you go on to do if you are
Mhm.
developing the skills that this major supports? And so someone who studies communication, maybe they go on to become a human resources manager. Click on that, and here's what Sally likes:
Mm.
mynextmove.org. Treasure trove of content and data. Someone in human resources needs to be skilled at listening, problem solving, verbal, math. They have to have all these tools, and their average salary might be 126K. And do the same for computer science. Someone who's going to be successful in computer science also needs problem solving, verbal. It's like, you just need to be good at living life. Sorry, I'm getting on a rant. Like,
But look at their
teenagers,
job
go live
outlook,
your best
making
life.
less money than the human resources person.
Yeah.
I
There you
know,
go.
look at that. The average computer scientist is making less money than the average human resources manager. Your kid is not average. Your kid will be somewhere on that curve. But I love mynextmove.org and the University of Missouri website to just learn and understand and think about, what does this job even mean? These
Mhm.
jobs that no teenager has ever thought about, human resource specialist. But I think it's a great learning tool.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think too, you know, and I love it. I would love for you to go to something like, we hear this all the time. What is she going to do with a history major? What are you going to do with a, right? Like,
Mhm.
I was actually on the call yesterday with somebody whose daughter wanted to study psychology. This person was a very hard science person. They were a researcher. They were talking about psychology like it wasn't really a science. And so I was like,
Mm.
P.S. I was a psych major. And they were like, oh, crud. Like, back it up. She said, I could tell she was kind of like, but what do people do with a psych major? And I said, well, first of all, I'm a psych major and I have the same job as my colleague Becky, who was an American Studies major, and Sally, who was a what major?
History major.
History. Oh, look, you are also gainfully employed.
Yes.
So, you know, so I think I think people who have very linear jobs, right? Be an engineer, do engineering, have a really hard time wrapping their mind around something that does not have an obvious thing to do, right? History, besides being a history teacher, what else could you do? Actually, tons of stuff, actually. You know, even in my, you know, I always talk about IBM, I believe, I don't remember, Becky, I feel like you found this detail. The third most popular major hired at IBM, it might have been the first, honest to God, was a psych major.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I remember finding that. And they were like, most commonly, you know, hired major. And I remember the mom was like, well, what are they doing? I'm like, I don't know, but they're definitely hiring. So you know, like there are jobs. I think that's just like a very common misconception that if you don't have something very linear, you're not going to get employed.
Data point number 2, LinkedIn, a treasure trove. The answer to what do you do with that? Here we are at University of Missouri, and I just searched for University of Missouri instead of searching for a name. And then I went to alumni, and everyone who identifies as from the University of Missouri on LinkedIn is here. You can narrow into communications, which I did. And look, what do? They are admissions counselor, presidents, senior man, like here they are. This is what people are doing. And you can, all the better, like check out the computer science people. What are the computer scientists doing? They're working at Amazon and Google and Boeing and Microsoft. And so you're not limited, like here you go. What I find really interesting is like, let's go to Google. To your point, instead of searching for a person, let's go, oh, I gotta do it here. Let's go look at Google. I didn't do this ahead of time, so I don't know what the answer is going to be. And let's see who Google is hiring and where they are hiring from. And my guess is that it's not going to be number 1 Stanford computer scientists. Let's see. I hope I'm right. People.
Yeah.
Berkeley. Stanford's number 2. Bummer. But look, they have as many business and administrative people. It's a quarter of their staff. Lots of options here. And the marketing majors are all over the place. I don't know. I think it's just super fun to look at.
And they had physical sciences was one of the majors too, which really supports. I knew physics majors who are, lots of them actually are now in, you know, working in Silicon Valley. So,
Most
yeah.
Googlers are in media and communication. Most Googlers are not technical workers.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, fun stuff. Data.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah. Yeah. So check it out. Look around. Definitely. Any other resources, or we have 4 minutes. So if you just wanted to show one more, or we can just
Ooh, do
kind
you
of.
have the thing from where is it from? The circle with the swirlies? This is really
I
Yeah, there's
do.
the
you know what I'm
Williams
talking about.
website.
Everybody else is like,
do.
what is she saying?
Yeah.
This is
What school is that from
This
again?
is
I
from
always forget.
Williams College.
Williams,
A
that's right.
mathematician, Professor David Dose, and I apologize if I said your name wrong, has compiled data on every single Williams College alumni, 15,000 people, and what they did with their major to career. And
Love this.
this reflects one small liberal arts college in Massachusetts. This is not a representative sample, but it is a very interesting data set to say, oh, what do you do with a political science major? Well, some went to law, some went to healthcare, some went to arts and entertainment. And even if you can see my screen, I'm sure these words are way too tiny. I suggest doing an internet search for Williams College impact major career path to find this. It's just super helpful to see how many pathways there are to every different industry and how many pathways away from any major there are to so many different fields.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I just noticed that from political studies, one of the pathways, like a significant, was to banking and finance. And I think maybe it was the former head of God, what was it? The FDA? I can't remember. Anyway, he was a political science major and then went on to Goldman Sachs. So the flexibility is absolutely there.
Right.
So
Well, I always joke that, the former general manager that both of us worked for right before we was an art history major, right? And our current SVP went to MIT, right? And studied this, right? So one person had a very clear direct path to being kind of the head of a company. The other one definitely did not. Both had the same job for all intents and purposes for a very long time, right? So you just never know what's going to lead you to the job you have.
Okay. All right.
And so talk to people about their pathways. Talk to people
Exactly. And
instead of
do
making your own
research.
decisions.
Do
Yeah.
research. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the informational interview, sorry, just to plug that. I love people. I would love for every student who thinks they might want a job one day in this field or that specific job to do a 15-minute informational interview with somebody who has it. People generally like to talk about themselves and their work, especially if they like it. So, asking, how did you get here?
All right, Karen, I'm sorry.
I'm done. I'm getting cut off.
I gotta cut you off. Thanks so much to Jan, Becky, and Karen. Be sure to listen next week because we'll be discussing attending college in the middle of nowhere versus in the heart of the city, the benefits of each. City is not automatically better. Becky can attest to that, as can Karen. We'll also be reviewing the top 10 FAFSA free application for federal student aid questions. And finally, I want to remind you that you don't have to listen to our shows live. Every show is accessible 24/7 on the Voice America website. You can download every show for free on iTunes. And don't forget, we're here every Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific.